Hi, my name is Allison Carrier, and I'm a teacher here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada at Earl of March High School. I'm here for the second part in our four-part series, The Four Foundation Elements of Dance. In this next video, we're going to be discussing elements of space and how they're used in both our elementary and secondary classroom. I really hope you enjoy. So when we talk about space, there's many different approaches, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to talk about three ways of looking at space, three ways of talking about space that you can bring into your classroom. So the first one, we're going to talk about levels. Next, we're going to talk about the spaces between dancers and negative space. And then finally, we're going to discuss travel patterns, so the use of space on stage. First, when we talk about levels, we're talking about the levels above the stage. So we could have high, medium, and low space. All right, here we are to show what I mean when I talk about levels high, medium, and low. When we're talking about the levels, again, we're talking about the space above the stage. So if we have dancers, and if you have your students and you are wanting to really quickly get this concept down, what I have students do is, number one, I'll show them what I mean by high, medium, and low, and then I will literally shout out, make a shape in high space, make a shape in low space, make a shape in medium space. We've already discussed shape in that first video. If you need to, go back and check that out, but at this point, I would do this lesson second, and I would have my students already kind of aware of the different types of shapes they can make with their body. And what I would do is say, okay, like make a shape in high space. So high space is any space really high, so I'm reaching my arms over my head, I'm on a rise, that would be considered high space. Medium space is anytime I'm standing in neutral, so my arms are not above my head, or I can consider myself in medium space about here with my arms over my head. So in dance, when we're discussing medium space, we're really typically talking about that space in that middle ground. My hands above my head, or on a rise, in a lift, I'm going to call that high space. So then naturally what follows next is low space. So low space for me is any time of a dancer's body in this lower, so if I'm down all the way on the ground in low space, I can be on my knees. As soon as I start coming up on my knees and reaching my hands up, then I'm going to consider that medium. Again, so low space, medium space, high space. Obviously, there's some gray area in between, but that's the general concept for students. So when I'm trying to just bring that idea home, we would stand in a circle, or we would even do a walking activity where it's just sort of a free improvisation, walking, connecting throughout the stage, and I would just shout, make a shape in medium space, and then I would do freeze in medium space. And then I would say continue, we'd walk through space, and I'd say make a shape in high space, and then make a shape in high space. And we could go through that activity. We can even start to say, let's identify our high shape space as a shape 1, medium shape as a shape 2, low shape as a shape 3, and then we could remember shape 1, shape 2, shape 3, and I could just start calling it out like that during an improvisation. So that is the basics when we talk about levels high, medium, and low. The next concept that we're going to be exploring when we talk about space is the space between dancers on stage. And then I'll give a little nod to something called negative space. So when we're talking about the spaces between dancers, we're literally talking about the amount of distance between dancers on stage. So if I have one dancer, well, I can talk about it differently and I'll get there in a second, but if I'm talking about the spaces between dancers, I'm really talking about large distances between dancers on stage, medium, and close distances. And when we talk about having students look at the spaces between dancers, what we're really talking about is what kinds of relationships is the choreographer trying to create, both a relationship with the audience and a relationship that's implied between the dancers. For most situations, what I try to explain to students is when we've got dancers in close space, we're trying to create a close relationship. When we've got them in farther distances from each other, we're trying to imply distance. So there's that nod to human relationships and human connectedness through just positioning of dancers on stage. Negative space, that's just all of the space that isn't being occupied by a prop or a dancer. So Again, that's an entirely different unit, which perhaps I'll get to at some point. But at the moment, the idea of negative space is just anywhere where a dancer's body or a prop is not. You can also sometimes discuss lighting and how lighting can fill in negative space as well. So not to forget that part as well. For my last section, when we're talking about space, we're going to talk about the use of the stage by the dancers. So really my main focus is travel patterns, but I do want to mention that sometimes when we're talking about dance and the creative process, you will have times when dancers use the whole stage, so they use large space. Dancers' bodies are covering the entire stage. Sometimes you'll have pieces or where the choreographer has chosen intentionally to have their dancers using very small space on stage. So just to note that students can also identify the concept of using the whole stage or using large space on stage or using small space. Medium is everything in between. But if I'm making a choice as a choreographer to have my dancers very tightly together and to not use much of the stage, that's going to give a really different impression to my audience than if I use that whole stage. So maybe if I use a whole stage, it's more energetic, it's implying distance, it's implying travel, it's energetic. To me, if I'm using a really small space, that creates a different mood or feeling, and that's something you might want to discuss with your students. In terms of travel patterns, we're going to discuss 4 distinct travel patterns today. So, as a dancer, I can choose to have my dancers move, or as a choreographer, I can have my dancers choose to move through vertical space. So that's that space moving up and down through your stage. Horizontal space, so that's moving in this direction. Circular space, so circular travel patterns or curved travel patterns, and diagonal. So diagonal meaning cutting across or in zigzags. So we identify vertical, horizontal, circular, and diagonal travel patterns. When I talk about travel patterns, the idea is if a dancer had paint on the bottom of their feet, and after the performance was over, if I look down, perhaps I could identify them, oh, these are the dancer's footprints moving in vertical space, horizontal space, diagonal space, or circular space. So when I'm speaking to students, I'll usually say, okay, if you need to make a piece that uses only vertical travel patterns, when I look down on the stage after you're done, if you had paint on your feet, all I would see was lines traveling vertically on the stage. So that's a really good way to get students to start thinking about it when you move further on and start trying to work on projects where they've been given specific frameworks to use only certain types of travel patterns. I think just a really important note for me, when we talk about a vertical travel pattern specifically, as a choreographer, and I really like my students to identify this, we can really start to create power relationships between dancers. Now, unfortunately, based on the times, I can't show you exactly what I mean, but I want you to imagine that I'm standing here in vertical space, and now imagine that there's another dancer back here in vertical space. I always ask my students to identify who has the most power, the person at the front or the person at the back. As the person at the back moves forward in vertical space, that power dynamic starts to shift. If they push past them, now all of a sudden I'm clearly in the position of power. If this person behind goes into low space, perhaps that changes the dynamic. So we really start to look at travel patterns, and I just have them discuss why you make those choices. A lot of the times if I want to create a scene where it's more pedestrian or moving through a crowd, I'll have my dancers moving horizontally back and forth through space. If you want to maximize perhaps the distance that you're traveling, you want to imply distance, imply travel, you might use a diagonal, which is the furthest distance from point A to point B on the stage. If I want to create a piece of choreography that maybe seems more confused, chaotic, joyous, I will use a lot of circular travel patterns. Again, it's really important to first teach the students to identify, and then to take that one step further and ask why a choreographer would make one choice over another. Hello again, and thanks for watching. If you'd like to read additional notes about teaching space in your classroom, check out the video link in the description below. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments section. Stay tuned for our next video where we'll be discussing the third of our 4 foundation elements of dance, timing. See you there.